In the gloomy orange light, you won't live to see the night. In the woods you hear a whisper, could it be the phantom drifter? There's a chance you...
Go west, they say. Fine, let's go west. Scooby-Doo, Shaggys Showdown was released digitally on January 31st, 2017, with the physical release happening on Valentine's Day of that same year. It was, in fact, the only 2D animated Scooby movie to come out that year, much as Curse of the Speed Demon had been the only 2D animated Scooby movie the year previous. Doug and Candy Langdale returned to write the script, and the whole thing was directed by Matt Peters. The movie wastes no time in getting to the point, as Larry, a ranch hand at the Crazy Q Ranch, quickly encounters our monster for the movie.
Kyle, would you quit? The Flaming J!
The Crazy Q is near Sorghum City, which is basically an Old West-themed tourist trap that, as we see, has recently come under new management. And the tourists find their vacations cut short when Jack appears and starts shooting the place up. As the tourists flee for their lives, we see the hook this movie is built on. Yep. Dapper Jack is one of Shaggy's ancestors. After some fairly frantic credits, we come back to the gang making their way to Sorghum City. As it turns out, the owner of the Crazy Q is one of Shaggy's cousins who found him through a genealogy website and invited him and the gang to visit. And Velma has a Guts Love level meltdown.
The whole website is El Kabong! What is it, a lost kitten flyer? Using El Kabong is like putting salt in someone's eyes.
It's funny because it's true.
Not sure exactly where they need to turn to get to the ranch, the gang stops and Shaggy gets out to ask for directions. Of course, the fact that he bears a resemblance to Dapper Jack means what few tourists are still in town immediately freak out the second he approaches them. They finally make it to the ranch and it's time to start teeing up the suspects. Andy and Midge Gunderson and their kids Buddy and Debbie.
It's Desdemona now? How many times do I have to tell you?
Buddy turns out to be a popular... influencer online with his own music career and all the other nonsense that goes with it. He's also afraid of horses. But enough about the Gundersons. Other suspects include TV producers Dave and David, and Carol and Sharon, a pair of prank-playing sisters. Larry introduces himself and another ranch hand, Kyle, and then mentions lunch, which of course gets the boys out of the van, which in turn causes everyone to freak out, getting the attention of Rafe, the ranch foreman.
Not a ghost!
I can fix that.
This movie was made possible by a grant from the National Rifle Association. After the confusion is sorted out, Rafe takes Shaggy to meet his cousin Tawny. After they marvel over Shaggy's resemblance to Dapper Jack, we get filled in on the backstory. Jack was a legendary outlaw who, along with his dog Atlas, terrorized the town back in the day, stealing from everyone and everywhere, and occasionally gunning down those who offended his sense of style. Basically, just the most loathsome scumbag in the West.
And consequently, quite a tourist attraction.
Jack was eventually brought down by Sheriff Rufus Carmichael, who wrote a book about the whole thing, which was a bestseller and subsequently started bringing the tourist trade to Sorghum City. Well, that and the Crazy Q's website, which Rafe designed.
Pretty darn professional, huh?
Yeah, nice font.
Night falls, and sure enough, Jack shows up to wreak havoc. Fred, of course, has a net ready, but because we're still only 18 minutes or so into this movie, winds up trapping himself in it. Jack chases Shaggy and Scooby into the house, and after an admittedly well-done homage to the Marx Brothers mirror bit from Duck Soup, Jack switches tracks to chasing after Daphne and Velma. Scooby gets Shaggy to go back into the house to save them, and in their own inimitable way, wind up shoving Jack out a window. But when they go outside, Jack has, of course, vanished. Morning comes, and while the boys head to breakfast...
I tried to take a piece of bacon, but he bit me.
Like, man, I tried to warn you not to get too close to the food when I'm eating.
Tawny says that a lot of the businesses in town have been shutting down, and ever since Jack showed up, the rate of closures has been increasing. A company called Black Rattler Management has been buying everything up and has made an offer for the ranch, but Tawny refuses to sell as she's lived there her entire life. Back at breakfast, Kyle and Larry show off their skills, which irks Fred, causing him to volunteer to help them with shoeing the horses later.
I was the horseshoe pitching champ of Camp Little Moose. I'll teach these cowhands a thing or two.
Okay, we all know where this is going, so let's just get it out of the way now. After breakfast, the boys encounter another ranch hand, Zeke, who is Mr. Magoo levels of nearsighted, to the point of confusing both Scooby and Fred for horses. After Zeke leaves, Fred makes a discovery.
I found some powder in the grass. Some sort of tiny crystals.
Meth, Fred. Probably meth.
Looks like boric acid.
Okay, fine, it's not meth. Meanwhile, Daphne and Velma head into town, where Velma visits the local museum while Daphne goes shopping. Okay, sure. Velma gets nothing but the usual spiel from the guy at the counter, but when Daphne shows up, she manages to get them access to the items that aren't on display. Plus, petty revenge for Velma being treated like crap.
Why, thank you kindly.
You're right, welcome.
In the back, the girls find a lockbox labeled Rufus Carmichael's Diary, but it looks like somebody broke into it, taking bolt cutters to the lock. The box is, of course, empty. The shopkeeper says he didn't even know they had it, and business has been so bad he doesn't even bother locking the place up anymore, so anyone could have taken it. He's even been thinking of selling to Black Rattler. Back at the ranch, Fred gets humiliated while Shaggy turns out to be a natural cowboy. Scooby encounters the Gundersons, and when Buddy refuses to get on one of the horses, Scooby shows him there's nothing to be afraid of. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. Fred gets the humiliation we already dinged him for earlier, and as night falls and the gang regroups, Dapper Jack shows up again, setting fires and spooking the horses. Scooby manages to get the panicked horse calmed down and back into the corral, while Tawny and Larry put the fires out. Fred winds up spraining his ankle, and in their cabin, the gang are forced to admit they don't have any strong suspects. Fred gives Velma the boric acid, who breaks out her chemistry kit to show them something. While she sets up, Daphne brings up Black Rattler as a potential suspect, since something like 98% of the ghosts they've unmasked have had something to do with real estate. As for Velma's demonstration,
Boric acid burns green. Maybe the ghost is using it for the green flames he shoots out of his guns.
Fred spots Dave and David putting something in the trunk of their car. They follow the producers out to a cliff in the desert, but thanks to Shaggy, their cover is blown, and it turns out the two are setting up a tripod for some reason. That reason is interrupted when Shaggy goes over the edge of the cliff, resulting in the most prolonged cliff-dropping sequence since Homer Simpson fell into Springfield Gorge. It turns out that Dave and David were taking location pictures for a movie they have in the works about Dapper Jack and Sheriff Carmichael. They suggested if the gang wants information about Dapper Jack, they should visit his grave, which is right down the road. The cemetery is, of course, another tourist hotspot featuring its own snack bar and canoe rentals. There's also a strange green fog flowing over the place, and a message on the headstone.
Evil lives on?
Oh no.
Evil dies tonight!
Jack appears and chases the gang into a canoe and onto the river. The river forks, and Jack blocks off the fork to the right, forcing the gang into the rapids down the left fork and almost over the obligatory waterfall. But thanks to Shaggy's roping talents and a little dumb luck, they manage to survive. When the sun rises, Tawny finds them and brings them back to the cemetery to get the mystery machine. Velma double-checks the grave and finds the message from the night before was UV powder, while Scooby finds speakers in the bushes. The elaborate setup convinces the gang that the ghost, real or not, is definitely dangerous, and they'll need to be careful going forward. Back at the ranch, the gang helps Tawny set up for the barn dance planned for that night after the rodeo, and Daphne makes another discovery.
Is this UV powder?
Uh-huh. We use it to make the decorations light up.
Tawny reveals that she and Rafe are probably going to have to sell the ranch because the mortgage payment is coming up and she doesn't have the $10,000 to pay it. Conveniently, the rodeo is offering a $10,000 cash prize to the winner of the Bronco riding event, and since Shaggy's got the skills and Scooby can talk to the horse, he's a shoo-in to win the money. Plus, Velma has an idea if Dapper Jack decides to show up and ruin everything. The movie comes to a dead halt for Buddy's musical number at the rodeo, and it turns out Carol and Sharon are his backup dancers. Sure, we'll go with that, why not? Unfortunately, there's a slight alteration to the plan when Scooby axes Buddy's horse in the procession and isn't able to talk to Shaggy's horse, although Scoob does manage to help Buddy overcome his fear of horses in the process. Shaggy manages to survive his ride without being thrown off, and it is, of course, this point where Dapper Jack shows up. Jack scares off the crowd, but the gang manage to cut off the exits out of the arena. A stampede of cattle suddenly comes roaring into the arena, and the vibrations cause Daphne to fall off the stands. Fred manages to rescue her from being trampled, but Daphne losing her grip on the net gives Jack a way out, followed closely by the cattle, which start chasing Tawny and the Gundersons. Shaggy and Scooby ride to the rescue, followed closely by the rest of the gang. Tawny's Jeep overheats and starts to break down, but fortunately Velma's horse allergy, which, yes, has been a thing this whole movie, I just forgot to mention it, spooks the cattle enough for them to start following the gang, allowing them to get the herd back to the arena, where Shaggy learns he rode the Bronco without Scooby's help.
That's amazing! Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to brain stop work.
Tawny asks Rafe if he knows what caused the stampede. He doesn't, but sticks around to double-check everything at the arena while everyone else goes back to the ranch for the barn dance. Shaggy gets awarded the prize money and hands it over to Tawny. Meanwhile, Kyle and Larry show up at the refreshment table where Daphne and Velma are on duty.
Happy to see me?
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
Grab him before he gets away!
Hey, how'd you know it was...
And yes, while Kyle was Dapper Jack, he had to have an accomplice who started the stampede at the rodeo. The gang search Kyle's room and find more evidence that he was running around as the ghost, along with something else.
It's a business card for Black Rattler Management, the company that's been buying up the town.
Velma realizes what's going on and who's been behind everything that's been happening. She takes the mic at the dance and reveals the true story of Dapper Jack. Jack was, in fact, well-liked and respected in the town, and Carmichael was jealous of him, so he framed Jack for cattle rustling and killed him in a gunfight. With Jack dead and the body missing, Carmichael continued committing crimes and pinning them all on Jack, giving rise to the legend. Eventually, Carmichael disappeared for a week, then came back claiming to have put an end to Jack's reign of terror. And, much like Carmichael, someone else has been using Jack's legend to cover up their own crimes.
And that someone is... Rafe!
Rafe tries to make a break for it, but Scooby manages to rope him. Rafe cut a deal with a resort development company who wanted to buy the Sorghum City area and theme the new resort around Dapper Jack the Outlaw. Hence the ghost business, which also scared people off, so Rafe could buy up the land by way of Black Rattler. And he got tripped up because, yes, of Velma's seething hatred of the El Kabong font.
There can't possibly be two people in the world who would use that font. I mean, look at it!
During the reveal, Rafe manages to loosen the rope and takes advantage of Velma's indignation to make a break for it, stealing the rodeo prize money in the process. He steals the stagecoach and rides off. Scooby and Buddy chase after Rafe, managing to get on the back of the stagecoach, followed closely by Shaggy on horseback. Larry points out it's getting dark, and without headlights, it's going to be hard to see the coach. Fred sets off the fireworks from Kyle's room, giving Shaggy enough light to see. Back on the coach, Scooby goes for the money while Buddy goes for the horses. Shaggy catches up and Rafe takes a shot at him, missing.
This was a terrible idea!
I don't miss twice!
So I fired again, and I missed, and then I missed again,
and then I fired again, and then I missed, and then I fired, and then I fired, and I missed. I missed both times, and then I fired, and I missed. This went on for several hours, and then I fired, and then I missed.
Scooby grabs the money and leaps onto Shaggy's horse, and Rafe's getaway is cut short when Buddy unhitches the horses from the stagecoach, causing Rafe to crash. And as morning breaks, Rafe is arrested, and Shaggy gives the prize money back to Tawny, who promises to tell the true story of Dapper Jack, and she's not worried about disappointing the tourists because the story of Rufus Carmichael, the outlaw sheriff, is a much better story. And as the gang heads home, Shaggy gets one more important thank you. Scooby-Doo Shaggys Showdown is surprisingly good. There's a couple of places where things feel a little padded out, like Buddy's musical number and a few of the gang's activities around the ranch, but it's fun, the jokes mostly work, Dapper Jack is a great monster, and it's just overall a really good time. If you like westerns with a dash of horror, this should suit you nicely. And so it's time to ride off into the sunset with another of the 30-plus films of Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
Those meddling kids to join the chase. No creep can keep them away.